Hey guys, this is Locke. In today's video, we're going to look at the damage the Nungle can do when Edda is supporting Nungle and also when Cocoa is supporting Nungle. We're going to look at the difference to see if Cocoa can be a replacement for a buffer for even magic DPS. So first I'm going to run it with just Edda doing all her buffs, and then for the second run I'm going to do it with Cocoa doing all the buffs. So let's get right into it. In both cases I'm going to attack on the second turn. And the reason I'm going to do that is because, I want to keep it consistent. Cocoa cannot get all her buffs in on the first turn. So to keep it consistent, I'm not doing anything else with Cocoa right now. I'm just having her take damage, but not really do anything because I'm going to use Edda's buffs. So let's see. I'm going to move her here, and I'm also going to put her at the exact same position because I know that Nungle can get damaged based on the, based on how far she is from the boss. So not doing anything here. Okay, so just hang on a minute, almost there. And I'm going to have the exact same buffs in both cases so that, it's comparable. Okay, so here we go. So she's going to cast this skill first, and then she's going to use her box. Okay, and finally she's going to use this damage up buff. So I'm not going to use Eagle Eye in both cases because Eagle Eye also gives the height advantage, and the box is also giving the height advantage. So I don't want to, kind of negate that. So I'm only going to use this sniping stance to see how much damage we can do. So right now, Nungle can do 8,000 damage with just, all of Edda's buffs. And if you attack with the crit damage, she does 12,000 damage. Okay, so 12,800. So let's say 13,000. So 8,000 with without any crit, and about 13,000 with crit. So now let's take a look and see how we do with Cocoa's buffs. So Cocoa is, you need 2 turns to set up all her buffs because unfortunately it's a bit more tricky, but I'll get into that too. I'll get into all the, advantages and disadvantages of both heroes. It is a little bit more trickier to set up, but, it's doable. So this time Edda's not going to do anything. I'm going to use her just to get everything done in 2 turns. But yeah, okay, I mean, I will explain everything else soon. But we're just going to look at the damage numbers right now. Pause there, go and attack with that. So that basically applied the vulnerable debuff on the boss. And then she's going to do this again. Okay, so almost there. Okay, so this is the position she was in last time. And now let's take a look. She does 7,600 attack, right, without crit. So with Edda, she had 8,000 attack without crit. And now with crit, she does 13,300. So she actually does more more damage with crit, which makes sense because Edda gives her more, sorry, not Edda, Cocoa gives her a crit damage buff. But as you can see, like the overall damage, even for a magic DPS, you get more damage out of Cocoa than Edda, which I mean, at the time I was a bit surprised by that because I mean, I only brought Edda because I was using magic heroes like Nungle and Beryl. So that's the only reason I got Edda, because I was like, hey, like I really want a very strong, buffer support characters for magic heroes because that's what I was using at the time. And so I that's the reason why I got Edda. But now I feel like I probably shouldn't have gotten Edda. I mean, okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration because Edda does have a lot of other uses as well. And I mean, so I will get into more of the uses right now. But if you're just looking at damage, straight up damage comparison, If you're playing a character that doesn't do crit often and it's a magic DPS, then Edda does a slight amount more damage. In my opinion, it is only a little bit more, like 400 out of 8,000. It's not that much. But after crit damage, Cocoa it provides the better buffs after crit. So, so that's what it looks. So now we know the numbers. We can talk about other differences between the two heroes and sorry, not the two heroes, but basically the two support heroes, and see how they compare and other advantages and things you can do. So let's start with Edda because I think it's a lot more simpler. Edda is able to, you can build Edda as like an attacking character. You can use, storm sniping and take arms. You can have her do a lot of damage with the assisting kind of attack. But I think these are all subpar compared to other DPS options. So I think the only real option to play Edda is as a full-on support hero to make your heroes, your DPS heroes do a lot more damage. And I think she does her job fairly well as, that one role. You can also combine her with Cocoa to get an even higher damage output. You can use two support heroes, right? And so Edda, I wouldn't say Edda is useless. And her box is also providing a lot of uses as well. Other things you can do with the box, I mean, you can hide behind it so that the other range attackers can't target you. You can also slow people down. And of course, the wine barrel casting, this also does an AoE slow. And the debuff from the wine barrel casting is also an AoE debuff, right? It does an AoE magic damage down. You can combine it with barrel to do AoE, like a huge AoE amount of damage. Cocoa is not able to do that. Cocoa can only debuff one character. So Edda is not, I wouldn't say Edda is useless, and I was exaggerating a bit when I said, oh, probably shouldn't have pulled on her. But she does have uses, which I just mentioned. She also is able to use her assisting attack. So in my case, I have the meteor line on her. So this way, I'm able to get debuffs on enemies, right? And like she's not doing anything else. She's how I play her. I do all her buffs and debuffs here, and the next turn I have her stand still because of the guidance of the world. So I can actually keep using these every 3 turns. So she will use her buffs once every 3 turns, and they last for 2 turns. So she's able to keep getting this out quite often. But while she's, not directly attacking, she's able to attack with the assisting attack and able to get these debuffs on them because of the meteor line I'm using. You can also achieve a similar thing with the whale hunter as well, because the whale hunter will afflict infection on the enemies and then, knock their damage down a little bit with the whale hunter. But basically, you're still able to do other things with Edda. But all of these are in a very supportive manner. They are just, they don't, supporting minus healing, like support without healing. That's what Edda can do, and she does it really well. But that's all she can do. Whereas if you take Cocoa, if you just look at the buff composition, increasing someone else's damage output, I think she's on par with Edda. I mean, okay, without crit, she's a little bit lower. With crit, she's a little bit higher. So, I mean, overall, I think that basically means that she can keep up with Edda's buff damage on magic heroes. If you have a physical DPS hero, I think Edda is a clear winner here. The reason for that is because the wine barrel casting only applies M defense down. If you want to make it similar, like you have to use a different skill called the Rapture Armor skill, but it only has a 50% chance, and it lasts for 2 turns. But whenever she does the assisting attack, that's the best chance to get the Rupture Armor on the enemies. But it is a 50% chance, like you might have a big turn coming up, and then you just realize that the enemy doesn't have their physical defense down, Whereas Cocoa, not only does she have the vulnerable 2 debuff, she's also able to, if you have a different hero providing the vulnerable debuff, she's also able to use this skill insert, Try the Pan, to bring the physical defense down instead, right? So, and she's also, as she's doing this, she's also bringing the speed down as well by 100. Edda brings it down by 150, I believe. But in terms of just the supporting character that can increase the damage output of a different hero, I think they're on par for magic heroes, and for physical heroes, I believe Cocoa is a winner there. I think she can definitely improve them even more. But Cocoa can also do a bunch of other things, she's a tank. She's able to soak a lot of damage. When she takes damage, she heals herself and heals someone else. She also does a lot of healing output with the Iron Pot Stew. And with the rotation I just showed you, like she will be using, these three skills. The third skill that she'll be using is the Snow Lotus that I told you, that I showed in my, what I just did. But she will be using the Iron Pots too, so she will be putting out a lot of healing as well. So even though you're only using her as a buffer like Edda, she's still able to do the other two things that she usually does, which is tanking. She's able to take a lot of damage, and she's also able to heal as well. And this is pretty significant healing. The heal from the Iron Pots too, and from her reaction ability. She's also, because she's a melee character. Now, I put the Silence the Hermit on purpose, but if I was actually using her in the supportive role, I would actually run her with the Redemption of the Judgment to apply the Judgment debuff. So if I applied this Judgment debuff, the enemy takes 10% more damage, even more than before. So I can't do that with Edda, because it's really hard to get her up in range of the enemy within two spaces and then not die, right? It's a lot more harder. She prefers to stay a little bit further back. So I can only do that, the Redemption of the Judgment with Cocoa. I can't do that with Edda. And then, as I said, like Cocoa is just able to do other things as well. She's able to tank and she's able to buff. The main advantage that Edda has over Cocoa is the the timing of the skills. As you saw, she can pull off all these three skills on one turn. So you don't need to, even at the very first turn, the only thing you need is to make sure she's faster than whoever she's buffing. And I was able to do that by using the Scroll of Augustus. But aside from that, she's able to, on the very first turn, she's able to use all these three skills, and you can have you can have a big turn. A big turn is when you're doing a ton of damage right on the first turn. That is a advantage for Edda that you just do not get with Cocoa, because Cocoa will need 3 turns to set everything up. But the good thing is that her cooldown is every 3 turns for 2 of these skills. So the Iron Pots 2, it uses 3 energy and has a cooldown of 3. The Vulnerability debuff, it doesn't have any energy cost, so it has a cooldown of 3. So obviously these 2 skills you can use once every 3 turns. And the third skill in the rotation, I was using the Snow Lotus. It has an energy cost of 1 and a cooldown of 2. So you can rotate these 3 skills. The only problem here now is that you're using 4 energy every 3 turns. So every 3 turns means you will only get 3 energy, but you'll be using 4. So you need to find a way to get 1 energy back. I was using Gloria, so it's very easy for me to do that. I can just use this skill to give everybody 1 energy. You can also get it back from triggering the happiness buff, because that reduces the energy the energy cost of your skills. It also reduces the cooldown as well. So you might actually have a totally different rotation if you have Cocoa at 5-star. I have her at 3-star, so I can't count on her reducing the energy, so I'm not taking that into the equation at all right now. I might come up with once she's 5-star, I might come up with a different rotation. But right now, this is working, and I feel like using this rotation, she is able to, even for magic DPS, she's able to provide a lot of damage output. Another difference between the two of them, which I already talked about, was that Edda is mostly good for buffing magic characters. Okay, like her Guiding Gleam also does improve the damage of physical characters as well, because it is an AoE buff that gives them 30% damage increase. So okay, sure, that will kind of, I mean, so if you have a group of enemies, sorry, if you have a group of heroes that are all magic heroes, magic DPS heroes, she is able to buff basically all of them except for the box, right? She's able to provide, all, not all, but AOE enemies with the magic defense down, and she's able to increase the damage buff of allies. But it's most effective when all of your DPS is magic, because the wine barrel casting is meant to be used for that, right? Like that will lower their magic defense, so you can do a lot more damage with that. With Cocoa, it's different. You can play a mixed team. You don't only have to stick to only magic or physical. You can do both. And the vulnerability debuff is great for that, because it will increase the damage that the boss or whatever enemies you're fighting take overall. So it's not limited to only physical or magic anymore. And this skill, the crit 2 and crit damage 1, this is also AoE. So similar to Edda, you are actually buffing a lot of characters. The only difference then comes this one, the Snow Lotus. Snow Lotus gives the damage up 3, also gives a bunch of other things as well, but damage up 3, and it lasts for 3 turns, which is why I picked this skill. So you have 3 things, like you're working in rotations of 3, so you want to keep your skills lasting for the 3 turns. What was my point? Oh yeah, so this one you can only cast it on one character. So if you have a team of 2 or 3 DPS, you are only able to give them the damage up to one of the characters, but you are able to give the crit and crit damage to multiple characters in your team. One thing that I found when I was going through all the characters in the game, I could not find anyone else that gives a crit damage buff to a teammate. Like, there are heroes that buff themselves with crit damage, but there isn't anyone that can give it to, there isn't any auras or any, like for example, like this skill. Let me just show you an example. Where is that archer? This one. So she is able to give crit to an ally, but nobody can give crit damage to an ally except for, 2 heroes. One of them doesn't, it only depends, because Cole can give the crit damage buff to all Clarity allies. Cole gives 15%, but if you're looking for a very specific hero, where did it go? This one. If you're looking for a very specific hero and that hero is not an Clarity, then I mean, Cole, you can't really use it with Cole, right? So Cocoa is actually in a very unique position that she's the only hero able to give crit damage, which is 15%, to another hero, right? And the crit rate increase is also pretty significant. 30% is huge. So I've been running other builds actually with other people. Like, for example, with Momo, the ideal card on her is actually, where did it go? The tower card, right? Because the tower increases if it's not your turn, you do 20% more damage. I mean, I think that's very simple, and that's why would you not put it on Momo? But now, if you're using her alongside Cocoa, I think there's a very strong case for the Verdict of Justice. And the reason for that is because when you're using, if Cocoa was not around, Verdict of Justice is a terrible card on Momo, because you're increasing crit rate by 15%, but you only have a 15% crit rate. Like, how often are you going to crit? Not that often. 15% of the time is, 3 out of every 20 hits, right? But if you combine it with the 30% from Cocoa, now that becomes 45%. So you're critting almost once every other hit, right? And the extra damage that you're doing is actually, so the base crit rate, I believe, is 30%. I can't confirm it, but some tests I've done show me it was 30%. So 30% plus 15 from here, plus 15 from Cocoa, so that's an extra 60% damage. So while you have the tower that gives you an extra 20% damage, with the Verdict of Justice now, you're actually able to do 60% damage every other hit, overall, right? And you can also increase that 45% with other gear as well. You can also have other buffers. There are buffers that increase crit rate. There are just no other buffers that increase crit damage. So I think Cocoa is, like overall, when I look at everything in the game, I think she actually is the best buffer. Like if I consider everything, I used to think Edda was the best buffer for magic heroes, but then I sat down and looked at the numbers and looked at the damage output, and I'm like, when I consider everything, I think Cocoa is better than Edda even for magic damage heroes. The only yeah, I mean, I think if there's a case, I would use both of them. Like if I'm only able to bring one DPS and I need this one DPS to do a lot of damage, then okay, I can see bringing Cocoa and Edda to doubly increase that hero's damage. I think that makes sense. But if I have room to only bring one support hero, I think 90 out of 100 times I would probably bring Cocoa, because not only can Cocoa, do the buffing, she's also able to do other things as well. But I still don't think Edda's, totally useless, because I mentioned there are other applications that you can use Edda in. But overall, I think those other applications are maybe 10 out of, 10 out of 100 times, 10% of the time. So I mean, I keep going back between regret or not regret that I pulled Edda. I mean, it's a game, I already got her, so I'm playing with her. And I also feel like there's going to be a lot of other applications for Edda in PvP, especially if you do manual PvP. I think she's quite strong there. But Coco also has uses as well. But Edda is good for, like the knockback prevention, because you can put boxes behind you to make sure you don't get knocked off the cliff. That's something. And I found other uses of the boxes as well. But overall, I'm not going to say Edda is useless. But in PvE, I think 90% of the time, you're probably better off bringing Cocoa, especially if the heroes that you're building have some kind of crit on them. And even if they don't, if you're bringing the Verdict of Justice on them, I think with Cocoa, you're going to do, significantly higher damage. When I did the damage testing, both of these heroes did crit. So, I'm not, I wanted to make sure I got the crit damage on them when I recorded the numbers. You saw in the video, the crit was there. So anyway, that's what this video is about. I was surprised initially. So maybe it surprises you as well. Maybe it's like common sense and I was just slow in realizing it. I don't know. But that's it for this video. Let me know what you guys think. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Take care now.